So recently I've been playing Diablo 3 with a couple friends of mine who have never played the game before, and it got me thinking that there's probably a couple things that I could show you to make your gaming experience a little bit better with Diablo 3. So if you've just booted it up for the first time, we're in Season 11 at the moment. The Necro patch had just come out this year. I'm not sure when, but it just come out this year. So let's kind of jump into some of the things to consider when creating your first character. So there's a lot of different classes to choose from. My recommendation would be just play them all eventually. Pick the one that you feel like is going to be best suited for your play style. You will find that there are going to be classes for specific patches that perform better than others, but if you're not really too concerned about that and you just want to have a good time, then go with that. Typically I play Barbarian pretty much every single season, whether it's good or bad. I tend to do it every single season, so there are a lot of different choices. One thing I would also recommend is play a seasonal hero. I would always recommend playing seasonal. You get new items for the seasonal campaign. At the end of the season, when it's over, your character goes back into your normal pool, and then you have to wait for the next season to start, where you'll start all the way over from level 1, etc., things of that nature. The other thing I would recommend is before you start, it's going to automatically put you on Act 1 normal. What I would do instead is just play Adventure mode. You can play the campaign if you want, but for me personally, I would skip it entirely. You know, pick your difficulty that you have to start out with, and then just play Adventure mode and go from there. So when you first load into Adventure mode for the first time, you might be thinking, well, what do I do? I mean, you have a couple different options. You have the obelisk here that you could do the Nephilims. You can eventually do graders. But one thing that I think you should start with is if you click on the waypoint for any town that you start in, you'll see areas with exclamation marks. These are bounties. There's 5 in every single act, and you get rewarded with a chest at the end of it. If you zoom out, you can change to different acts, and as you can see, there's 5 acts. So, but I would go through each one of these and do all of those, and that's a good way to get started. Before you dive in too far, there's a couple things in the settings that you may want to take a look at. So if you hit escape and go to options, there's a couple things here. So under gameplay, the big thing that I would turn off initially is damage numbers. There's going to be a lot of damage on the screen. If you do want to see the damage numbers, just turn it on so you can see the critical damage and kind of leave it at that. You can also turn on these if they're not already on, as far as the health bar numbers, monster health bars, things of that nature. Another thing to consider is the damage is now displayed differently than it used to be. So this is how the damage is currently displayed by default, and if you don't like that, then you can backtrack back into the game options and do display long floating combat numbers, which looks like this. I personally prefer the long digits over the 100 millions or the 42,000 millions that show up. It just is easier for me to track my damage overall. Another thing to consider is show advanced tooltips. So advanced tooltips will show you a percentage difference of the gear that you're looking at compared to what you're equipping, so it just makes upgrades that much easier so you know what you're getting. And additionally, you want to look at elective mode. You definitely want to turn that on so you can fully customize your skill selection and your placement on the action bar. Otherwise, the game is going to restrict you and it's not going to allow you to do certain things. So you definitely want to turn that on so you have full control over how you want to do your skills and the game is not limiting you at all. Another thing in the settings, if you hit Alt in the game, it's remapped for me, but it used to be Alt. You can see tooltips for items on ground disabled. Now what that means is if you were to drop an item on the ground, let's say these boots, eventually the name of this item will fade. You'll still see the light because it's a legendary, but eventually the name will kind of fade out of existence and you could easily miss it. If you want to see the name displayed at all time, then you want to make sure that's enabled. Now for me, I use Alt for other things, so it might be wise to go ahead and remap it. If you're looking at a weapon and you're not sure how the stats rolled in comparison to what the max or mins are, you can hit and hold the control button and it will show you the mins and max of every individual stat on both the weapon you have that you're looking at and the weapon that's equipped at the time. Another thing to take into consideration, if you're looking at weapons like I am right now and you see I have a gem for crit hit damage in, you do want to take that crit hit damage out of the equation entirely, so if you hit and hold shift, it'll actually eliminate it. So you can see that base damage, this weapon is 21% worse than what I'm currently equipped. One thing to note is you will over time start to get blood shards, and you can increase your capacity by doing solo greater rifts, as it says here. When you get blood shards, you can come over to Kadala. She's in every single town in each act, and you can spend blood shards to get any of the things in here. So mystery weapons and items, it's an easy way to try and potentially upgrade your gear without having to go out and really farm too heavily for it. If you click on this anvil down at the bottom, it'll open a menu on the side that shows all your crafting from bounties and crafting materials that you've gathered throughout the game. If you're a neat freak and you're looking at your stash where you're putting all your weapons and you want to organize it a little bit better, you can actually right click on these tabs and you can change the icon so you know specifically what you're housing in each stash. Sometimes you may have certain skills that you have to click on an enemy to use it, and it can be frustrating because there's so many enemies on the screen, they're constantly moving and maybe you're missing it all the time. So one option to this is holding shift and then using that skill. I can't cast this skill otherwise because it's linked to my move. My move is my left click, but if I hold shift, then I'm able to actually cast it anywhere I want. So you may want to consider using force move, so it's easier for you to move through packs of enemies without accidentally clicking on them. So if you go to options, key bindings, and we scroll down, we'll find force move, and you can map it. Mine is currently mouse wheel down or left arrow. So basically what this means is I can move with my left mouse click like I normally do. You can click and hold, or you can individually click. But if I click on an enemy, it's going to cast a skill. So if I do mouse down, I can actually move right through packs of enemies without having to worry about clicking on them accidentally. If you're playing with a group of people, there's a couple things to note. Firstly, any loot that drops and the gold that drops on your screen is for you individually. You can drop the loot for the most part. There are some exceptions, but you can drop the loot for the most part to share with other people in the group. However, health globes that show up, those are for the entire party, so make sure you pick those up because they benefit everybody. If you are playing with a group and you've separated and you find something that is noteworthy, you can hit G on your keyboard and it'll put your banner, and it'll show a little icon on the map, but it'll put your banner on the location and gives them an idea of where they need to go so they can catch back up. If you're looking to travel quickly, you can use the waypoint in town. Another way is to click M on your keyboard. It brings up your map and then you can teleport from there. Now if you're in town, you teleport immediately. If you're out of town, it takes a little bit longer, so you do have a little bit of a wait time, so keep that in mind. You don't want to be surrounded by enemies. One other thing you should think about is the numlock trick. So if there's a skill for your build that you need to cast constantly, such as my build, this skill here I need to have casted all the time, you can do a numlock trick so it's casting all the time without me having to hit the button. So the way this works is I've mapped this skill to numpad 7 on my keyboard. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit 7, and then I'm going to hit the numlock button, and then I'm going to let go of both. And so now it's set up to do automatic. So one of the problems with the numlock trick is that since you're casting it all the time, it makes it difficult to teleport, revive people, or do some of the objectives that require a time, because it will actually interrupt it every single time. If I try to teleport here, it won't actually even start the bar because it's going to interrupt it every single time. But there is a way around that. So when you're looking at the map, right before I click it, I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to click and it brings up the chat prompt, which actually stops the numlock trick, and then I hit escape right before I go back. So again, enter, click, and then right before I teleport, I'll hit escape so I don't have to worry about typing in the chat instead of using my skills moving forward. You can do the same thing when trying to click on people to revive them or objectives in a map. You just hit enter and then click on their icon or their grave or whatever you're looking at, and it will start the timer. And then when you hit escape, you'll go back to using the numlock trick. As you progress in the game, you'll start getting a lot of legendaries when you come back to town. You can identify them one at a time if you really want. I prefer to just hoard them in my inventory, and then when I get back, I go to the Book of Cain. There's one of these in every town. It identifies all legendaries in your inventory at one time in one go, so you don't waste a lot of time. You can salvage all your legendaries and the other material here after you level it up. You have to level these up first before you can really do it. You can also craft armor and weapons from the blacksmith. The jeweler, you can craft rings and amulets and remove gems from things. The other place you want to level up is the Mystic. So when you get the Mystic leveled up, you can enchant weapons, which allows you to pick one specific stat. As you can see on this one, the little blue circle next to 10% damage, that's the stat that I've chosen to re-roll. Let's use this for instance. So you can pick the individual stat that you would like to re-roll in this. You can click on this to see what the potential options are. You can see that they can be a little bit different sometimes. And when you click one, you have to have these materials and you have to pay for it. It'll give you the original stat plus 2 more additional ones, and you can pick the one you want. And you can constantly re-roll so long as you have the materials and the money to do so. You can also transmog items, which changes the appearance. So in this case, we have this, which is actually currently transmogged to this, but as you can see, we can actually change the appearance of this. So any weapon that you pick up in the game actually gets put into here, and you can transmog all of them. I like that one. It does cost a little bit, but it's not bad. And then dye allows you to put armor in here and change the color of it. It works for all armor except for the bracers, and it doesn't work on weapons. Oh, it also doesn't work on belts, if you consider that armor. So there are a couple different type of legendary items that you should know about in this game. We have standard legendary items, set pieces, which as you collect, you'll get bonuses for each piece of the set. And then you also have ancient legendary items, which you can see the gold border around, and it says ancient set scythe at the top. These roll better and higher stats than normal legendary items that you can get. And then lastly, you have now included primal ancient legendaries, which are the good stats of the ancient legendary, except they roll max every single time. So as you can see, it rolled the top for the damage, percent damage, vitality, and the crit damage, and it will roll like that every single time. And for the primals, if you were to try and enchant these, let's say we want to roll off the crit damage or the vitality here, and when we re-roll it, it'll show you the new ones, but it always rolls perfect rolls on it. As you progress in the game, you'll be thinking about your build and how you want to create your class and what skills to use. If you need some guidance, I recommend personally using DiabloFans.com. I'll put the link in the description below. The last thing I wanted to share is when you get to town, find Zoltan Cool and try and do his quest as soon as possible. You'll end up getting Kanai's cube, which will end up being in every single town. It allows you to extract the powers of legendaries that you collect in the game, and you can use their passive abilities for your builds. And it also gives you a list of other things that you can do as well, such as reforging legendaries, upgrading rares, converting other items, and even augmenting ancient items to add more damage onto them. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed my tips and tricks, and it makes your life in Diablo a little bit easier. If you have any other tips that you want to share with other players, please leave a comment below. I've linked the timestamps in the description, so you can always come back to this video and reference other things in case you need it. And check out DiabloFans.com if you're looking for build guides. If you liked the video, leave a like, and make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with other content in the future. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.